unfortunate late-stage diagnosis or a deliberate deception? Former President Joe Biden's cancer revelation has reignited debate about his health while in office and reopened old wounds within the Democratic Party. Although there's been an outpouring of bipartisan support, it's also prompted speculation of an Oval Office cover-up. You're watching Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. Former President Joe Biden's diagnosis with advanced prostate cancer that spread to his bones is a devastating blow to a man who's dedicated more than 50 years of his life to public service. But personal tragedy aside, the political fallout can't be ignored because, as renowned cancer expert Dr. Stephen Key told my colleagues on W News, this form of cancer would easily have been detected in a routine blood test.
98% probability is that this was known at the time of his physical last July and wasn't revealed. It's simply not credible to have cancer be in your bones 13 months after having any sort of prostate examination.
So what exactly did the president know and when? It's renewed speculation around Biden's cognitive and physical health while in office.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if.
Conspiracy theories abound, including the suggestion that it's an orchestrated distraction ahead of the release of a scathing book about his presidency. Today on Counterpoints, we'll debate if the public response to his news amounts to political point scoring, if there's evidence of a political cover-up, and if there should be age limits for political leaders. Stay with us on Counterpoints. Well, joining us to discuss Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis and the polarising reaction from the public, I'm joined by Brian Krassenstein, a journalist and co-founder of Krassenstein, and Joey Mannarino, political strategist and commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to Counterpoints. President Biden's cancer announcement, less than a year after he dropped out of the presidential race, has led to quite a polarising discourse in the US. Now, along with the expected messages of support and best wishes, there have been a surprising number that have been apathetic at best, and some even wishing the former president good riddance, to put it as politely as I can. Brian, why don't we start with you? What did you make of the public's reaction to the former president's diagnosis?
Well, Donald Trump, I think his reaction, although I doubt he actually wrote that post on Truth Social, his reaction was one that I commend, wishing him well. Some people, though, took things to an extreme, like anything you see online, especially on X, calling, like saying that he deserves this, that wishing that he rots in hell or stuff like that. I think it's just ridiculous, but it's come to be expected, I think, on social media these days.
Joey, what's your take? I know you weren't a fan.
I'm not a fan of Biden. I mean, I don't wish cancer on anybody, but I'm not going to sit around. I think it's hypocritical for people who criticized the man for 4 years to turn around and say, oh, we're so sorry, and we're so sorry you're not well. So people were quite honest. I think wherever they stood with Biden is kind of where they have let their opinion stay. And some people took it really far, yeah. But honestly, these are people, a lot of those reactions were from people that were in the J6 prison for 4 years, awaiting sentencing or awaiting a trial even. I mean, I can't really guilt anybody for feeling how they feel about this man having cancer. He ruined a lot of lives.
Well, Joey, go ahead, Brian.
I think there's a difference between, disagreeing with a man politically and wanting him to suffer in pain or die. I mean, that's just common decency, I think.
Joey?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can say that, but people literally rotted in jail. There were people who couldn't have cancer treatment in jail in Washington, D.C., January 6th people, at the hands of this man. He sat there and called half the country garbage. 325,000 children went missing under this man's watch. Laken Riley, I'm sure her parents wish that her life wasn't lost either. So, you can't sit there and say, oh, he was such a, whatever. Political disagreements, these are lives lost. I know you guys, Brian and your brother, you're going to defend this man no matter what he does, frankly, because you guys sat there when he took the shower with the daughter and said, oh, pediatricians recommend the shower with the daughter. We have to tweet. So I know you're not going to criticize him.
You're just spouting conspiracy theories, Joey. Nothing you're saying
from Ed
is grounded in truth.
What's not truth? What's 325,000 children that went missing is not truth? Laken Riley dying is not truth?
Joe Biden didn't lock the January 6th convicts up. You know that, right? We have three branches of government: the judicial, the executive, and Congress. And you're acting like Joe Biden called for these people to be locked up, and he was the one that determined their resulting sentences. That's not how it works.
Whose DOJ was it? Whose DOJ was it?
It doesn't matter. Do you know how the court system works? Do you know how the judiciary works? It's not the head of the DOJ determining if somebody's locked up or not. Nor Biden.
We all know how that went. We all know how the January 6th cases went. We all know how unfair that was. There were people, Jake Lang sat there awaiting sentencing 4 years.
All right, I'm going to turn us back. I'm going to turn us back onto the topic at hand. And I want to ask both of you how much political tribalism played a role in this. Has politics sort of become a bit of a sport? If you're pro-Biden, you're going to send well wishes. If you're anti-Biden, you're going to say, well, you get what you deserve. Is this just a team sport now? Brian, what do you think?
It really is. And I think if you polled most of America would say, yeah, this is a shame that Biden has cancer. I think the most extreme responses are the ones that are being amplified by the media, by, just random people on social media retweeting and stuff. So I don't think so. There's no doubt there's tribalism in the United States. I think both sides treat politics as sport, where it shouldn't be that way. But I don't think that what you see amplified on social media represents the country as a whole.
Joey, what do you think? Do you think it's an accurate representation?
I can't tell you if it's an accurate representation or not. People feel how they feel about the guy. I'm sure most people just shrug their shoulders, to be honest with you, because he's gone. Nobody's really thinking about him anymore, to be honest with you. So this all comes days after, I think it was 2 days ago, James Comey, director of the FBI, put on Instagram 8647, calling for the assassination of Trump. All right,
he denies that. He says he wasn't calling for the assassination of Trump, but he did put the picture there, just to clarify.
Well, 8647, I mean, most people have commonly thought that would be an assassination threat. And I think
have you been to any protests by Democrats over the last, I guess, like 8 years? Because there's signs that say 8647 and it means to remove Trump from office. It's not meaning to kill Trump. In fact, Republicans are selling T-shirts 8646 on Amazon and on Etsy, and they posted it on social media as well. And it meant to impeach Biden, remove Biden by the 25th Amendment. So you guys just keep rewriting history and keep changing the definition of phrases and numbers in order to paint Democrats as this evil, violent group, when you guys are the ones that think that it means kill, and you were the ones posting it for years.
For years. Oh, okay. I never heard 8646, frankly. I heard 8647 by Comey, and then we saw a bunch of people retweet it. And the Secret Service clearly takes it as a threat.
Yeah, Brian,
the Secret Service clearly takes it as a threat.
The Secret Service visited your brother about a similar tweet.
Yeah. And he tweeted 8647 because he was calling for the impeachment of Donald Trump. And then you have the Secret Service, who said that they were instructed by Washington to pay him a visit, coming to his house to intimidate him for calling for the impeachment of the President of the United States. This number was never used by Democrats to call for the death of anybody. And Don Jr. went on Twitter shortly after Comey made that message and started tweeting out, oh, he called for the death of my father. And then it got amplified by libs of TikTok and by End Wokeness and by people like Joey saying that it's a call to death when that's not what it was. And they redefined what it meant so that they can paint Democrats like me as somebody violent, even though Ed said this isn't a call for violence, this is a call for impeachment.
So why didn't he just say impeach Trump? Why did he have to say 86 when everybody knows how that's commonly used?
Because I didn't like the fact that the right wing was trying to redefine the number that had been used for years by both the right and the left in order to call for the removal of a president from office. So I continued to use it so that your definition and the right's definition wouldn't be propagated, and the real definition that has been being used for the last 8 years did propagate.
Okay.
Where did the term from? Okay.
All right. Before we get too deep into that, let's get it back onto the reactions to President Biden, maybe what he did know and when. During the final stages of his presidency, Biden's health was under an unprecedented level of scrutiny, and now, in the light of his cancer diagnosis, that speculation takes on a whole new layer of complexity. It's prompted some, including President Trump, to ask if there was a cover-up. So take a listen to the president's comments from the Oval Office. Let's see if we've got that recording for you.
There are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out that's not so. It's very dangerous. Look, this is no longer politically correct. This is dangerous for our country.
Okay, Joey, let me start with you. Do you think there's evidence of a cover-up of the former president's ill health?
I think they've been covering up that man's health since before he got elected. He got elected, quote unquote elected. Shouldn't even been sworn in. He got sworn in. From the minute he got sworn in, the man could barely complete a sentence. All right. We saw for years he stumbled through the entire presidency. He could barely get a word out. He was confused, falling down. I mean, you never really looked at this man and said he's a picture of health. For years, the staff knew. The book just came out from Jake Tapper, who is absolutely no friend of Donald Trump, saying that essentially Biden was mentally incapacitated for most of the term, and a major cover-up was underway. I find it very hard to believe a man who is probably the most cared for person on planet Earth, the President of the United States, the most person that we should care the most about the health, that he has a private personal doctor, right? Could miss this. That's a pretty big thing to miss, that suddenly it shows up, it's stage 4 and it's in the bones. I just don't believe it. I can't believe it. Just like I can't believe that he was mentally fine the whole presidency when pretty much everybody could look at the man and say something is really not right with how he walks, how he talks, how he is rationalizing every word he says. Something is wrong with Joe Biden. Something's been wrong with Joe Biden. Of course, they couldn't tell us, because then we would all consider him even more illegitimate than we already considered him.
Okay, Brian, what do you make of that?
He had a very rare form, a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. Doctors on NPR said that these cancers can basically pop up within months, 7 months. There really isn't a way to detect it because he probably wasn't getting a PSA exam. He was over 70. Most doctors do not perform PSAs for men over 70 because it's at that point, most prostate cancers are slow growing and it would outlast your lifespan anyway. So there's a reason why, the other presidents had PSA exams and Biden didn't, and that's because he was old, right? He was 82. His last exam he was 82. in late 2024. So it was likely missed because of that. As soon as he got the biopsy, 2 days later, he reported what the biopsy said. He was as transparent, more transparent than any former president, any president up to this point. They released all of the data that was necessary. I don't really know what else you want. You can speculate and say that he covered it up, but that's just speculation and conspiracy theory at this point. There's plenty of people that get prostate cancer. It goes undetected. It gets into their bones, and stage 4, when they have Gleason 9 prostate cancer. So I mean, there's a lot of speculation by people that aren't doctors. I'm not a doctor either, but I've read up a lot about it, and I've listened to doctors talk about it, and it doesn't seem out of the ordinary at all.
Joey, why should we question the president's veracity here?
Well, I mean, this has not been the most transparent administration ever. Joe Biden was never known for his honesty. But earlier today, a former Biden official went on CBS and said that they didn't perform a prostate-specific antigen test on Biden because it's too costly for his age, is essentially what they were trying to make us believe. I mean, how are we supposed to really understand that this is a man who was responsible for being the leader of the free world, and they didn't do every possible test? They didn't do a PSA test because he's too old. I mean, maybe they just looked at him and said, look, this one's beyond saving anyway. Who cares at this point?
No, I mean, that's normal. A doctor will not order a PSA test if you're over 70, in most cases.
Yes, but if you're the president of the United States,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for the same reason. Your health is literally the most important thing. He was only president for another year. He was only. You're kind of not making sense here, Joey.
I'm not making sense. Okay, but you know what?
No, you're not.
We all know Biden wasn't the one running the country. So really, if he had dropped dead in the middle of the presidency, nothing really would have changed anyway. They could have just propped him up for the rest of the time, and it wouldn't have made a hell of a lot of difference.
Joey, you put out a tweet on the 10th of March after President Biden's interview, and you said that you watched the interview on MSNBC, and you said that you realised how ignorant those are who attacked his mental well-being. Now, and his health and his fitness, now that you know what you know, do you question maybe that tweet? Do you question your support for him at the time? Does it colour the way that he presented himself?
I assume you're asking me that, right?
Brian, sorry. My apologies. My apologies, Brian.
I don't think I ever said in 4 years one word about that man being mentally fit.
My apologies, Joey. Brian, you put out the tweet on March 10. Has it coloured your impression?
And that was prior to his debate, I'm assuming. And after the debate, I changed my opinion. I do think that he was too old to be president. I think that the fact that they were going to run him again was irresponsible, and I'm glad he dropped out. Now, fast forward another year or two, and we have a man that's going to be the oldest president ever in the United States. So we're not exactly a lot better off right now, but yeah, I think we need younger candidates. We need people in their 40s and 50s running rather than in their 70s and 80s.
You say that, and we're going to come to that in our third segment. I want to talk all about age and young people in politics. Before we get to that, Joey, and I am meaning to say Joey this time, let me ask you, is the timing of this a coincidence, or is it an attempt to generate sympathy and distract ahead of the book release that you referred to a little earlier?
I would assume it's the book release, because I just don't see why suddenly they announced this when everybody's finally putting scrutiny back on Joe Biden's presidency. For the last, I'd say, 150 days, nobody talked about Biden. He was as good as gone. Now everybody has a magnifying glass back on the presidency of Biden, the mental acuity of Biden. And right away, David Axelrod came out and said, this is not the time for that discussion while the man is suffering. So, is it even real? Who Who knows? Who knows? Frankly, who cares? Nobody's going to do a check because he has no power. So they just want him out of the headline. The Democrat Party does not want to have to relitigate the past 4 years of Joe Biden because that presidency was a complete disaster. And they're coming up on another election. The midterms, we're starting that season right about now. And nobody wants to run around having to campaign talking about Joe Biden because that is a sure way to lose. So, yeah, it's just a way to neutralize that conversation. And now anybody who comes out and talks more about all the mental unfitness is going to be told, don't speak about a sick man like that. Well, that's just how they love to do things in that party.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans want to keep Joe Biden in the news because they realize that Trump is kind of dropping the ball on everything, including the economy. And this is a way to do that, to shift attention away from what's actually happening to the average American, I think.
What do you make of that, Joe? Is this a distraction, but maybe a false flag distraction orchestrated by the Republicans?
It's a distraction but you see, you're saying the Republicans leaked that Biden had cancer, so we stopped talking about Trump. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, you just like you did with Hillary Clinton, you can't drop the previous candidate. You should be looking ahead and looking to the future, and you guys are looking in the past because you realize that the future might not be so very bright right now.
I mean, the past of Joe Biden, the economy of Joe Biden was absolutely abysmal. The inflation rate was through the roof. I mean, what are you talking about? Of course, we're going to talk about that presidency. We have a direct comparison of what we just had, what we had from 2016 to 2020, and now how things are going back on the 2016 to 2020 trajectory. Look at the jobs numbers. Look, everything is on the right path right now. Joe Biden had the country in an abysmal state. That's why Kamala got crushed in the election, too, because she was running on the Biden record. Brian, the American people spoke. She won 0 of the swing states. She got the popular vote. Even that she lost. Democrats rarely lose the popular vote. She couldn't even win the popular vote. I mean, come on, Brian. This presidency of Joe Biden was probably the worst in American history. So there's no point to even try and defend it. I understand you have an audience to talk to, but come on. I mean, you got to move past him at some point. You got to.
Donald Trump didn't even get 49% of the vote, or 49.8% of the vote. And you want to talk about a bad economy? Have you checked out the GDP? The U.S. economy shrunk for the first time in years in the last quarter, and it's likely going to shrink again in the next quarter. Why? Not because of Joe Biden, but because Donald Trump.
According to who? Who says it's going to shrink in the next quarter? All these experts have been wrong.
According to who?
Trump.
Well, did you see last quarter? Did you see what happened to the
tariffs
GDP?
are kicking in. Everybody's economically uncertain. They're trying to do all this stupidity right now, and all these world economies are trying to mess with the United States because they're scared of these.
So it's the world's responsibility. But when COVID happened and supply chains froze up, and the whole world had inflation, you blame that on Biden, right?
You want to talk about supply chains?
Okay, before we get too stuck into tariffs and the economy, I want to ask Brian a question about something that you mentioned, Joey, as well. Do you think that this renewed speculation about Biden's health, this renewed scrutiny about who within the Democrats knew what, is going to be damaging for the party as we head into the midterms?
No, I think that as we head into the midterms, there's going to be one thing on everybody's mind, and that's the economy. And right now, with the tariffs and with Trump, giving businesses all of these uncertainties, the economy is not performing the way it was under President Biden. And Joey can pretend that the economy is so much better now than it was under Biden. But the only thing he can point to is inflation. The inflation rate is slightly lower. But every other economic indicator that I can think of is down compared to when Biden left office.
Joey, what do you think? Is this going to be something that Republicans are going to jump on ahead of the midterms? Is this evidence of a big rift and a split within the Democrats?
Well, I mean, if I was a Democrat voter and the party sat there and lied to me for 4 years that this man was mentally competent and that he was the one in charge, but we come to find out, I mean, number one, I don't know how this is news to anybody that he was gone in the head the whole time, but let's assume they're finding out for the first time. That's a big problem. That's a big problem of trust because I should expect those who are around the president, if he's completely mentally incapacitated, it's not like he has a staff of 3 people. There are hundreds of people who work in the White House. Nobody thought to say something. Jim Clyburn sat there and all these other congressional leaders sat there and talked about how incredibly mentally competent this man was and how bright he was and how he was just so fit for the office. Turns out, not at all. There's no chance at all. And I think more is going to come out. I don't think this is the end of this. I think we're going to see so many more stories because people are going to throw this man, if they're smart, if the Democrats are smart, which nobody's ever accused them of that. If they are, they're going to throw this man under the bus because that's the only future they have. If they're going to run on the Biden record, they're screwed. They will be absolutely demolished in the future. So I think just as they threw him under the bus to let Kamala run, they're going to throw him even further under the bus and they're going to run him over with it this time.
Brian, does the party need to distance themselves?
I think that Democrats are looking forward right now. They're not looking back. And I think they'll continue to look forward. And they have plenty to point to while looking forward as to what this administration's doing that is anti-American, anti-economy, and anti-constitution. And they will run on that. And I think that 2026 is going to be quite shocking for some people, especially on the right.
Joey, are you strapping in for 2026?
I can't wait. I can't wait. Now, I mean, in theory, usually the president's party does lose seats. But I mean, I don't know what the Democrats have to run on this time. He's talking about anti-constitution. It's the same thing over and over again. They're going to talk. Last time they ran on the Russia stuff. This time they're going to come up with a new conspiracy and run on that. They don't ever run on policy. The Democrats always run on fraudulent investigations or we're going to save democracy, something stupid like that. They'll come up with something. We don't know what's coming, but we'll see what happens. I think if the Republicans actually come together and start passing the agenda we voted for, because I'll tell you the truth, as a Republican, I'm not really happy with the action or inaction of our Congress right now. But if they get it together and start passing the agenda that the vast majority of the American people want, we're going to have a beautiful time in the midterms. We'll just see what happens with that. I'm not thinking that anyone is going to listen to the Democrats saying, oh, it's a threat to democracy. They tried that again in 2024, and Kamala lost every single swing state by quite a bit.
Some of your comments there make me curious. Joey, do you think there needs to be a commission of inquiry into what Biden knew about his health, some sort of investigation into his doctors, or do we just let this go and everyone should move on?
I don't think you can just let it go because you had a man who was completely incapacitated signing these bills. Who knows if he knew what he was signing? The pen, the auto pen, the pardons, nobody has any idea what this man knew. Judicial appointments were made. Supreme Court justices were appointed to the court. The people, okay, let's go with the theory that Biden won the election fairly. So say the American people actually voted for this guy. Who was running the country? No one knows. And that to me is a huge scandal. So I don't think it matters what he knew about his health because the man clearly was suffering from serious dementia or something of that nature. What I want to know is why the American people were deliberately lied to by the entire apparatus for 4 years. That doesn't make any sense. Should there be a commission? I'm not sure, but something needs to understand. We need to know what happened.
Brian, do you think that it would be beneficial if there was some sort of investigation into this so that all the facts are on the table, and if the president is telling the truth as you believe he is, then the whole thing can be put to rest?
I think it's just ridiculous. The man has cancer. He's likely dying of cancer, and you're going to open up investigations into whether he really has cancer or not. Like that's something that right would love, because they can generate an outrage machine and more hatred toward the man that's dying, right? But no,
but maybe
I
an
think
investigation into what he knew and when, and who in his staff knew, and what his doctors knew.
No, I think that's ridiculous. It's not going to impact the American people in any way. And he's a private man now. He can, live out his remaining years in privacy. He doesn't have to, go through all these investigations into whether he knew he had cancer here or there or then, or who knew. I think that's ridiculous. And it's mostly just conspiracy theories because they need to distract from the current events.
It's not about Biden. It's about the transparency of the office. It's nothing to do with Joe Biden personally. It's
Was Trump transparent about his health after COVID? Was Trump transparent about his health?
Oh, is Trump the one who sat there walking around, falling down airplane steps, stumbling over words every 2 days? Trump's in office right now, and he's more competent than Biden was on his best day. So I don't know what you're talking about who's transparent and who's not.
That has nothing to do with what I asked. Was Trump transparent about his health? Because I remember several occasions during COVID, after COVID, where they would not release information. And even after his COVID diagnosis, they didn't release the drugs he used. They didn't release what happened and what led up to him going to the hospital. None of that was released. He didn't even release his medical records before COVID.
Duties? Was he ever unable to perform the duty? Did anybody ever question that he was the one running the country? There were doubts.
People question all the time whether. You don't think people question whether Trump can perform his duties when he's saying that he's only going to be a dictator in day one, and that he doesn't know if he has to obey the Constitution, and he ignores the Supreme Court's 9-0 decision? You don't think people question if he can do his duties as president? Seriously?
You're questioning his mental fitness. You're questioning Donald Trump's mental fitness.
Absolutely.
You're telling me Joe Biden, but Joe Biden was completely mentally fit. That's what you're trying to tell me?
I'm trying to tell you that there's reason to question Donald Trump. I think Biden was an older man, and I think as the presidency progressed, I think his age started to show. Do I think he has Alzheimer's? No. Do I think he's lost his marbles? No. I think he's slowed down significantly, and he shouldn't have run for a second term.
Yeah, and he did until they basically had to throw him out because he was not going to give it up. Look.
Well, and I think they should have, right? We both agree with that. I don't think.
So here's my question, Brian. He's gone. Why can't you people now just admit it was one big bad mistake? He conned a lot of people, or not him. I don't blame him. I don't blame Joe Biden. I don't think he was mentally fit enough to know or do any of what was done. But people like Jill, the doctors, the children, all the people around this man, I mean, they propped him up. They lied to the public. Why don't you guys realize what horrible political strategies stand that he was mentally able to do the job? He was
so because their judgment was different than your judgment? Like, is there actual verifiable, data or medical records that show that he was not mentally able to do the job, or are you just making that up based on your own personal opinion?
Did you not see the 4 years that I saw? Did you not watch that debate where he literally said, "We beat Medicaid"? I mean, this man sat there. Nothing he said made sense for 4 years.
Have you listened to Trump speak like for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I hear Trump speak every day. He goes out to the press. He speaks to them. He took more questions in the first 2 weeks of the presidency than Biden took in 4 years. They hid him. They sheltered him. They kept him away from just about everybody because when you rolled him out, you didn't know what version you were going to get. And we all know that's true. So I just don't understand from a point of political strategy why you guys can't just say, look, this guy, he was out of his mind. The family and all the people around him who really are kind of out of the picture now conned the American people. We're moving on. He screwed us, so screw him. I don't see how you guys are not there yet because the American people don't like being conned.
Joey, you're basing it off of your personal opinion, and the personal opinion is people on the right. Now, if you had medical records that said, oh, he had dementia or something like that, yeah, then you'd have something to go on. But right now, it's just your opinion. I think Biden did a great job as president. I think as he aged in the last year of his presidency, I think that he was too old. And I'm glad that he didn't run for a second term. I was one of the people that said that he can't run for a second term. He promised that he was going to run for a first term. And I think that when he ran for that second term, that pissed me off. I was like, okay, he broke that promise. We need somebody newer. And I think a lot of Democrats felt that way. But at that point, it's hard to go against a presidential candidate who is an incumbent when they want to run again. It would destroy the party and it would destroy chances. Not that I don't think he probably would have lost anyway. But still, like, for you to say that Democrats are, not admitting something, I think a lot of Democrats admit that he was too old to run for a second term. I don't think when he was elected in 2020, he was too old. I think that he was doing well. He did well as president. Trump is now older. I think Trump is too old. And the fact that you're calling out one but not the other, I think, is a little bit hypocritical here.
It would be hypocritical if Trump was stumbling around, not talking to the press, not taking interviews, not taking questions, and looking like he was completely... Do you remember Giorgia Meloni walking Biden around in Italy because he couldn't find his way? I mean, even George Clooney said he didn't know who he was. Joe Biden did not even recognize George Clooney. Who doesn't recognize George Clooney and their friends? I mean, you can't sit there and tell me that there was not evidence. But Brian, you would defend this man no matter what
Joey,
he does.
Joey.
You would yes.
I agree with you that at the end of his presidency, he was too old. I'll give you that. I agree. I don't think he should have run for a second term. I think he was too old. And I think Donald Trump is too old right now. And
it's interesting you say that, Brian, because it leads me on to our next segment. I'm going to move us on because we're running out of time, but I want to touch on age. You've both referred to it during our debate so far. When President Biden left office, he was the oldest serving commander-in-chief in US history, and the current US Congress is the oldest in history. That's led to accusations that in America, there's a political class that is out of touch with young voters. So, Joey, let me ask you, should there be age limits on US leaders?
See, when you say age limits, it's tough to say because Trump and Biden are virtually the same age, but Biden's 80 and Trump's 80 are not the same 80. Now, in general, do I feel Congress is too old? Yeah. Do I feel like most of our leaders are probably a little bit too old? Yeah. Do I think they've been there too long? Absolutely. But it becomes hard to base the criteria on just age because, I mean, we all know we have families. Some people in our family are 90 and they're running around driving cars, doing everything. Other people at 70 are halfway on their deathbed. So an age limit is tough, but we absolutely need to have some form of mental acuity tests, cognitive testing, which Joe Biden didn't undergo, but Donald Trump does regularly undergo the cognitive tests.
They all underwent the cognitive test.
Yeah, that's completely untrue. Like Joe Biden did not undergo a cognitive test that was in the physical papers. So in any case, the doctor didn't feel it was necessary is what they said, or something to that nature. In any case, they need to undergo cognitive tests because we cannot have people who are mentally impaired. I mean, there's people, Dianne Feinstein, if we remember her, she was being rolled around, literally drooling down her mouth, looking completely dead, voting. They were putting out tweets for a Democrat congressman after he died. They were still tweeting from his page. They forgot the fact that, oh, the man doesn't have a pulse. Let's stop tweeting out ridiculous anti-Trump policy. So, I mean, absolutely, there needs to be some form of control on who is actually in these offices and if they're mentally fit and who's running their actual operations if they're not. And if they're not running their operations, they got to go.
Brian, should there be age limits?
Yeah, I think there should be. I don't know what that age would be, but I think that we're at a point where Congress is just getting older and older. I think this is the oldest Congress we've ever had. Obviously, the presidency has been occupied by two really old men. I think it's time. I think it has to happen, obviously, when an old president isn't in office, because obviously nobody's going to vote for it if Trump's in office. It's going to be hard to get Congress to vote for something like that because they're all so old. But it's definitely something, it's well supported in America. I think both sides agree on it. And it's something that could get done. But the best way to get it done is to first vote in a lot of young candidates, especially in Congress over the next 2 or 3 election cycles.
That's interesting that you say that, Brian, because that's going to be my next point to both of you. So let me ask you first. How do you attract younger politicians? How do you encourage young people to be part of the political class?
Yeah, I think that you gotta make politics and change cool. And I think that something Republicans have kind of done better than Democrats is that they're starting to use social media as well as like conferences a lot better than Democrats do. Mm-hmm. And when you have conferences like CPAC or, Charlie Kirk, it gets people together, young people together, and it gets them excited. And it makes them make connections. And those connections, they spawn all sorts of ideas, and it starts pushing people to think about entering politics. So something Republicans have done outstandingly over the last probably 2 or 3 election cycles, I think, is that. And Democrats have lagged at. Now, I do know that Democrats are working to catch up, talking to some Democrats myself, but they definitely are behind the curve on that.
Joey, what do you think? I mean, a rare show of support there for the Republicans from Brian. Do you think that they are doing better? And why do you think America has struggled to attract younger politicians in the past?
Well, here's the thing with the politicians getting in. When you run for office, it's not a cheap endeavor. You kind of cannot continue to do another job while you're campaigning for the office. So you can't really get in if you're not established in some way. It's hard. If you're 30 years old and you don't own a home and you're just, getting by and you make maybe, I don't know, 60K a year, 100K a year, you can't just quit and say, yeah, I'm going to go run for office. It's very difficult to do that. So by the time you have enough money saved up to even stop what you're doing and start a campaign for office, you're already older or you come from money, either, one of those 2 options. So that's difficult. Then it just is a game of donations, wealth, stuff like that. It becomes very hard. When you start removing so much money from the process of politics, then you can open it up for more everyday people to get in. And I think younger people would get in, to be honest with you, because the interest is there. The interest is absolutely there. And we've seen a few that were young on both sides get in. But these were people that either were independently wealthy. AOC was, I think, from some acting agency. I don't know what that was. But Maxwell Frost, I'm not sure how he did it. There's a few that have gotten in on both sides. Madison Cawthorn from the Republicans, I believe he was independently wealthy, though. It really comes down to when you're young, you don't have the money to just stop what you're doing and run for office. I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. Mostly. I agree with that mostly. I think that money kind of skews things more towards older people. With that said, I mean, there are super PACs and the DNC, RNC, they can back candidates with money, but it's hard for young people to really make the connections and get involved. Usually it's people in their 50s and 60s who, they have all these connections already from careers or from, just life experience. And then they're the ones that jump in and have this advantage.
So do you think when we see this interplay that we're seeing at the moment between AOC and Bernie Sanders, do you think that we're getting a little bit of the old guard experience and the young energy kind of teamed together, Brian?
I think that what's happening with Bernie and AOC is that Bernie's like trying to pass his popularity off to her, trying to get his supporters to move to her, realizing that he doesn't have much time in politics left. It is interesting, though, looking at polling. Bernie is favored far more than AOC is among Americans. Will that change? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's more of the further parts of the further left of the party, Bernie and AOC. So you see that kind of passing the guard. But I think you'll see that in the more moderate sections of the party as well. At least I hope.
Yeah. Joey, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, on the Biden thing or on the youth in politics?
Yeah, youth in politics. I mean, you know, if it is just down to money, I mean, what does that really say about America?
Yeah, it is not a good thing. No, it really is not a good thing. Now, I think in 2028, you're going to see younger candidates. If you look at the front runners from both parties, you don't have these older men like you did for the last two cycles. I think J.D. Vance is the obvious front runner with the Republicans. Ron DeSantis is also talked about. I believe they're definitely both under 60. They might both be under 50. On the Democrat side, they're talking about Kamala again, which, I mean, please, God, that would be beautiful. But Gavin Newsom, these are all younger people. So there's not really any up and coming, quote unquote, 80-year-olds that are going to be running next time. Hopefully, I do agree with Brian that we do need a younger crop of people running the country. So I think it will be nice because there's simply different problems in different generations, and you can't speak to them if you're not part of that generation, perhaps. So that would be a change that would be great. And then we wouldn't have to be sitting here talking about Joe Biden and his dementia and arguing over whether or not he's the one signing bills. It would be nice to have mentally competent people.
This has been a really interesting debate. I feel like maybe we might need to have both of you back on again as we hit these midterms coming up. It's all we have time for, unfortunately, but we really do appreciate both of your points of view here on Counterpoints. Thank you to our guests, Brian Krassenstein, journalist and co-founder of Krassencast, and Joey Mannarino, political strategist and commentator. And as always, thanks to you at home for tuning in to Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. You can catch all of our episodes on the Al Arabiya English YouTube channel. And of course, follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.